Today we are joined by Daniela Andrade, a Fulbright scholar completing her master's in media studies at the University of Amsterdam. Daniela graduated from Harvard University this past May, where she studied neuroscience and philosophy and served as the co-president of Harvard Undergrad Women in Entrepreneurship. Under her leadership, the organization won Student Organization of the Year, and she was honored with Harvard's Women's Leadership Award. And now she is based in Amsterdam. Daniela is an advisor to WW Labs, now known as Telly Labs, and a team member at Resolution, an AI lab focused on helping young women prevent lifestyle stressors from escalating into doctor's visits. Resolution's first product, Fabio, is designed to support women with breakups through AI-powered guidance. Beyond her work with Resolution, Daniela has built a thriving community of over 39,000 followers on LinkedIn, where she helps people strengthen their personal brands, build communities both online and in person, and amplify her stories that inspire and uplift others. Daniela, we are so happy to have you on our podcast. Thank you for letting us have you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for thinking of me and inviting me.
Amazing. So, I wanted to ask first, you've worn so many hats from co-founding startups to building a strong personal brand and following on LinkedIn. We want to use this conversation to find a common thread throughout all of these experiences. If you had to describe your founder journey in one sentence so far, what would it be?
Yeah, I think the best way to describe or the common thread among all my work is really solving problems that I personally experienced. And so that seems pretty broad, and I think it seems pretty straightforward that I think given all of us have unique experiences and we've all had, had to overcome different challenges that we're uniquely positioned to better solve. And so I felt that a lot of times throughout my own experiences of being a first generation low income college student where I didn't have a network, I didn't really know how to build a network. And so I just started posting on LinkedIn, and then my community just started growing and my following just started growing to the point where I get opportunities offered to me across speaking, across working at startups, across even helping people invest in startups. And so that was just one pain point where I really wanted to build that network that I didn't have when I got to Harvard. And it's been an overwhelming reaction across Harvard Women in Entrepreneurship. I felt that before I joined the club and led the club. I would be one of the only women in the room at a lot of these on-campus founder events or entrepreneurship events, and really didn't see any woman in the room, let alone women building or interested in women's health. And so I really wanted to grow this community of Harvard women in entrepreneurship to really support these women and girls who want to build and want to support other women. And so just again, the common thread among all of that is just really being able to solve these pain points that I've personally experienced. Because if you're experiencing a problem, most likely than not, other people are experiencing the same problem.
Yeah, thank you so much for answering that. Across your projects that you've completed, like Telly Labs, Mama Muse, and Medication.ai, what problems or frustrations in the world had constantly drawn you in?
Yeah, I think it goes back to like health is wealth. There's a saying that, a healthy person has like 1,000 problems, an unhealthy person has one problem, which is obviously their lack of health. And so I think health is a common thread among all of us that everyone aspires to be healthier, happier. A lot of our, happiness and mental health is tied. Sorry if you hear that ambulance going in the background. But yeah, so I think women's health specifically, which has been significantly overlooked across academia, pharmaceutical studies, and even in modern, applications of entrepreneurship devices and biomedical technologies, really haven't been inclusive of women. And so I definitely think that women's health and supporting women and their ability to, be healthy, and a lot of that doesn't necessarily only mean physical applications of health like blood testing or fertility, but a lot of times that affect our health, especially at this coming of age period that everyone on this call is going through. A lot of it's like lifestyle factors, like changes, like being away from home, you know, moving to a new city, needing access to new care, meeting new people, um, engaging in romantic relationships with others. And so a lot of times these big decisions that we don't really consider like health stressors in a traditional sense actually have a significant effect on our health. And so that's kind of what we are working on at Resolution right now is to really understand these lifestyle stressors that uniquely affect women and how we can prevent those lifestyle stressors from turning into doctor's visits. So, yeah.
I just had a follow-up question to that. This is completely different from like the talks of your journey, but you recently have moved to Amsterdam, and
Yeah.
I feel like that is a completely different setting from Harvard. So, what
Yeah.
are some like life stressors that you have discovered now, versus
Yeah.
recently moved to Harvard? Like, because that is completely different path.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think the stressors are kind of similar, but they're felt in different ways. Like I think when I first got to Harvard, like meeting people, making friends was definitely challenging. And I think that's challenging for everyone when they're a freshman and they first are new to campus and in a new environment. But I think similarly here, unlike Harvard, where English is almost everyone's first language in some capacity, here, in Amsterdam, even though it's very international and there's a lot of like expats and students from abroad who are studying abroad or international students like myself. I definitely think there's a different cultural environment around how friendly Dutch people are. So making friends, I think, has been kind of challenging. Luckily, my partner, who I met at Harvard, he moved here with me. So that's kind of been easy. Um, to navigate and kind of assimilate, given that I have, someone already here. I also think the food culture, I don't think we understand. I mean, I don't know how the food is like in Philly, but originally from New York, and there's just so many good options of food and diverse, arrays of food. And here the food is just not great. So I've been getting used to like cooking more at home, which I really never cooked at all on campus. We had dining halls. And so just navigating like different parts of my life, like at Harvard, everyone lives in a dorm, and so in a house. And so we had like somebody cleaning up the bathrooms and cleaning up the common spaces, like a janitor. And whereas like now I live in an apartment and like I have to like manage everything myself with my partner, like such as cleaning and like laundry and all these things that like are part of adulting, which I don't think you recognize until after you graduate how much you have had it easy while living on campus. But I know Penn's a little different. Like I know people are more often than not live off campus.
Yeah, that is true.
Definitely. I think we're still in our like 2 required years to stay on campus and on the dining plan. So I think next year we will be thrown into the deep end of the pool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sort of wanted to transition over to Telly because that when I met you, that was sort of like the main thing that I knew you for. And we understand that with you and Telly, you went through a rebrand. Wanted to understand like what was behind that decision and what did you learn about like evolving this idea of WWV Labs to stay true to its mission?
Yeah, great question. So when we launched WWV Labs, WWV stands for Women Who Venture, and it was predominantly focused on supporting women getting access to opportunities at startups. So originally, I ran Harvard Women in Entrepreneurship, a student organization at Harvard, and I wanted to launch like an initiative within the club to help our members get jobs like term time internships, summer internships at startups. However, nobody really wanted to do it for free, right? Any money that we would get from a startup to pay for this service would go to the club. So there was no equity, there was no monetary incentive. So nobody really wanted to do it on top of all the academic workload you have on average as a student at Harvard, as a student anywhere, frankly. And so that's where me and my co-founder kind of came up with this idea to kind of build this as a separate business entity focused on women. But then as the business started evolving and after, I was awarded the Fulbright, I realized I had to step back. And my co-founder, Adrian, who's a guy, he wanted to open up the talent pool to be more broad beyond just women, to also include, men to have access to opportunities at startups. And so that's why the rebranding occurred to just expand the talent pool more, to focus more broadly on students in general. And that process is still happening, but we thought that made the most sense given the new focus on students in general. But we still run our newsletter, Her Hustle, and we still have this kind of like affinity group within the organization focusing on women, but it's no longer, bless you, it's no longer the primary focus of the talent pool that we're trying to access.
I wanted to kind of talk about how the pivot was from tele to resolution, especially because it's kind of a different sector that you moved into. So, what was the transition like, and what were some of the hardships that you faced?
Yeah, so actually it's funny that you say that because a lot of people think it's like the other way, that like me working on telly was kind of out of the norm for me because I've kind of been in the women's health space for a while now, and telly kind of grew out of this opportunity that I saw to help women find jobs at startups, which can include women's health, but not only focus on women's health startups. And so I think the transition for me was really about opportunity, like where did I see myself able to grow? But I think women's health has always been a personal, pain point and experience and shared collective experience of most women our age. And if you think about where almost all the investment of women's health is going into, it predominantly falls in like three buckets, which is like fertility, like how to get pregnant, menopause after you get pregnant, and then pregnancy while you're pregnant. And so women like us aren't really like at this critical age of like development, aren't really the target user for these new women's health innovations since it focuses a lot more later. And so we felt that it's not because we're necessarily more healthy, it's just because we have different healthcare needs that aren't necessarily addressed. And so I just found that this pain point was just super interesting to me and that I've always returned back to women's health. And since I've been able to like build this network of women who are interested in women's health or who are building in women's health or who are doing research related to women's health. Like I helped launch MIT's first women's health hackathon this past May. And so I've kind of always been around the community. And I think that's just a strong piece of advice is that if you're interested in a space, like kind of getting to know the players or the decision makers in the space, whether that's like investors, advisors, founders, startup employees, because I think it can always like I talk about this a lot on my LinkedIn that I haven't like applied for a job in like my entire time in college because almost all the jobs that I've had access to and opportunities have been like referral based or because I knew someone, and a lot of that has come from me actively putting myself out there, building a brand, and like meeting people who've like commented under my post or DM'd me saying like, "Oh, like saw you working on this, like thought this might be interesting." And so I think that's kind of how I've been able to stay, active in this space and also um meet my friend Shreya, she actually goes to Penn as well, who she's the founder of Resolution.
Nice. I had more, now this is like gonna go more into like the funder or investor perspective for you. Essentially you've built Telly to match hundreds of students with startups. And what kind of patterns do you see in the kinds of problems that student founders are trying to solve or like the startups themselves are trying to solve? Does that make
Yeah, and so I guess because Telly focused more on like talent, um, I think what we see more specifically to reframe the question is like the types of people founders want to hire nowadays, at least overwhelmingly are two types. They're AI engineers or content creators, like growth marketers. And so they either want people who can help them build AI agents for, whatever, healthcare, legal, supply chain, etc., or they want students who are really good with social media who can like make TikToks, make LinkedIn posts, help make content for the founder, for the team, for themselves, for the company, and make really engaging content that gets a lot of views. And so that's kind of what we've been seeing across the board. I mean, with AI, people are trying to make agents for literally everything, which I think is the power of AI to like be able to apply to really unique difficult disciplines that previously were more challenging to address. But I think now the difference is that so many people have the power to build things since you don't need a coding degree or you don't need to hire a full engineering team to build an app anymore. That really what's the differentiator is that when there's so much competition, it's really about mind share and cultural capital. Like who knows about you? Do they know about you through TikTok, LinkedIn, kind of like series, Cluely, are just examples of student-led startups that have really done well because not because they have the best product in the world, but because they had really good marketing and like people just knew about them and heard about them all the time, like through socials or through their friends or through group chats. And so I think that's kind of where I'm seeing the shift happening because a lot of young people are really struggling to find jobs. I don't know if you guys have kept up with that. There's tons of articles and tons of people talking about it with the economy, and like perhaps a looming recession, because young people can't find jobs because entry-level positions are getting replaced by AI. But I think if you're a really good engineer, you're definitely in demand. But if you're also a good marketer who knows and understands trends, social media, how to post, that's also been a skill that's been high in demand across different startups.
Really appreciate that answer, and super detailed. And I feel like yeah, definitely like the job economy, like really is sort of this, I don't know, almost like this like parallel thing that's happening that sort of relates to why talent pools are so important right now. Wanted to generalize this a little bit more to all of your experiences. So you've supported other founders through um, your angel investing arm. I know we didn't get a chance to talk about that, but I think that's something that you mentioned at some point, and you're like the WWV Labs website and stuff. Also, feel free to talk about that. But that and like women in entrepreneurship. So, like, what mistakes or patterns do you see most often, and what advice do you find yourself giving to folks?
Yeah, I think the one of the biggest mistakes I think I see happen often is people thinking that they need to build an actual product to like go to investors. Like I think people aren't recognizing the power of like going back to what I was just saying about like distribution. Like A16Z has talked about how they've invested based on like a viral tweet. Like a viral tweet about like the need for this product, right? Like without an actual product being made. But like so many people thought like resonated with that tweet and was like, yeah, this is like a problem and this is something I'd pay for. And so I think people need to recognize that the way and the way that startups work today is not how they worked even like 3 years ago, right? Like Cluely and Series, like they probably wouldn't have been taken seriously 3, 4, 5 years ago, right? By the startup investors. But the landscape is changing very quickly and the dynamics around it are focusing more on, you know, and this doesn't mean like c conversion either. Like I think people need to recognize just because your product goes viral does not mean your people are downloading your app, let alone downloading and constantly using your app because there's differences between like downloads and actual retention. But I think it goes back to like you can show traction, and that's kind of what investors are looking for. Like if you're looking for investment, which I don't recommend for everyone, I think bootstrapping as long as you can is perfectly fine for most people. But if you are looking for investment, you can show traction in so many different ways that doesn't just focus on building a product. Like that can be a landing page, that can be a TikTok, that can be a tweet. And so I think a lot of people overlook those dynamics. But again, it depends on your product. Like if you're building a consumer product, those traction signals focusing on socials and more, um, less product focused signals, might be different than like companies that are enterprise level that actually need to like build that technology to get investment. And so it really depends on the space. But overall, I think definitely recognizing that you can do so many things before you actually spend time and money building a product to validate that hypothesis that people actually want this and are going to pay for it is something I see a lot of people try to skip over, but I think it's a really critical, important step.
Yeah, thank you so much for that answer. We have one final question before we wrap up this podcast. So, if you had one message to leave for the next generation of founders, and specifically young women, what would it be?
Ooh, oh my God. I feel like every time I get this question, my answer changes based on like what's happening in the world. But I think definitely like finding your community, wherever that is. Like, I think taking the time to really understand what you're interested in and finding others that are also interested in that. Like, I think college is actually such a great environment since you're around such smart, ambitious people. And so I think don't forget about the how much advantage you have over that because now that I've kind of graduated and moved abroad, like there are definitely still smart, ambitious people, but I think you kind of don't realize how quickly you lose that so fast after you graduate, since people are just working on different things and have different goals. And so I definitely think finding your community and keeping up with people and finding ways to like, help with projects or add value to others, I think is just always a way to like enable like you to have like learning opportunities and good experiences. Going back to what I said about like how I've been able to stay active in the women's health community, and I think a lot of that was just like finding a community, finding newsletters, finding all these different women who I kept up with. And I think that's super important. And that could mean anything. It could be like supply chain, fintech. Like there's so many communities now that are like online but have in-person events that I think could really widen your network and also give you opportunity. And so that's the advice I'd give to find a community once you've kind of settled on what you're interested in.
All right. Thank you so much, Daniela. Really appreciate all the advice you had and wonderful insights. Definitely things that I haven't heard about, and I took so much away from this conversation. I think we're just about at time. So, yeah, thank you for your time.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank
so much.
you. And if anybody wants to keep up with my work, you can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm active there.
Yes. You post
Awesome.
every single day. That is very impressive.
Yeah, it's a grind, but you kind of have to keep the algorithm pushing your stuff.
Mhm. Thank you so
Awesome.
much. Thank you so
Yeah.
much
Yeah,
for taking the time with us, and can't wait to follow you on your journey. So
thanks,
enjoy.
guys.
Thank you.